purpose of the meeting is to evaluate all of the petitions that have been given to us. And to be considered by the board as a whole, it will require 5 votes to approve. And with that, Mr. Simeon, will you take a roll call, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Sved?
Here.
Commissioner Stewart?
Here.
Mr. Simeon is here. Commissioner Croft?
Here.
Commissioner Fisher?
Here.
Commissioner Stiles?
Here.
Mr. Galosi? Here. Mr. Huckrow is excused. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Simeon. Also with us is Ms. Laura Fell. She's the Zoning and Planning Administrator. And her assistant, Susan, Susie Riddle, thank you. I don't know why that sticks on my tongue. And also Dave Greco, he's our attorney, and Mario Ortega, planning consultant. And with that, I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve the agenda with the exception of item 5, the CIP, to delete that fee.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Stewart, supported by Mr. Simeon, that item 5 be deleted. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Need a motion on the minutes of April 21.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of April 21 and dispense with the oral reading.
Who supported that? Mark? Well, I've got a brain problem. Croft, yes. I had it, it was there, but I couldn't get it out.
I got it.
We have a motion by Ms. Croft, supported by Mark Stiles, to approve the minutes of April 21, 2021. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Legislative action. Case number 21-14, ZTA, Chapter 11, Medical Marijuana Ordinance, Amendment, Replacement, postponed from 4/21. Proposed ordinance replacing, amending the Taylor Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 11, Medical Marijuana, to issue license and regulate the marijuana facilities and the marijuana establishments, to the extent they are licensed under the Michigan Medical Marijuana Facilities License Act, MCL 333.27951 ETSQ, and the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, MCL 333.27951 ETCEQ. And that is for open for conversation. I might add that it's a closed meeting and we are not accepting any comments from the audience. If you have a comment that you want to make, you may do so online. And that is the extent of that. So to the board, what do we, how do we feel?
I wouldn't mind hearing Commissioner Simeon's comment on the existing ordinance.
All right,
Mark?
Mr. Simeon.
Okay. Thank you. I just made a few comments. I filled out the form that was sent to us in the packet and by Susan and Laura, the checklist. I went through that. I also went through 4 other city ordinances just to review what they had. They were basically Warren, Royal Oak, Ann Arbor, and Saline. And they're all good. They're very well written. I think there was the ordinance that comes before us here, the 2021 version, is quite an improvement over what we had before. It really defines a lot more items. I'm not going to read what's on my checkoff list here, other than the fact that one of the recommendations I made, and you can agree or disagree, is that all of the facilities, whether they're grower or so on, should be regulated land uses. In terms of them being in an I-1 or I-2, I think it should be further defined by facility, use, and function, whether they're in an I-1 or an I-2. And I think that needs a little bit further study. I didn't actually go through that. Some of the ordinances I read through from other cities really didn't define the zoning so much, but I think we have an opportunity here to actually specify the zoning for each use. And the distances in feet from other facilities, when you go to the page that's in here, there was a section that crossed out churches and other items. I'll get to the page in a minute. Page 5.
That's on the draft, Chris.
Yeah, this is on the draft in the proposed ordinance number 2021. If you go to page 5, paragraph 9, I don't know why the religious institution, public park, and so on was crossed out, but it was. And I think maybe we should differentiate between whether it's 1,000 feet and 500 feet. And I didn't want to take up time at this meeting to do that because there's a lot of other factors that we talked about last time, and we actually worked out quite a bit, spent a lot of time talking about. And those factors include, whether there's roadways in between, there's open space, and so on and so forth, and what the actual other use is. Like, you wouldn't want to have the same distance to a religious facility or a grade school that you would for another adjacent facility. Also on that same page on 5, under paragraph 7, one of the things I just wrote in, and we can agree to disagree on that, is that there would be no lawn signs or billboards. And one of the other things that's notable is you don't see any cigarette billboards around anymore. And I think that's a good reference point for, this proposed marijuana ordinance. The other thing is no drive-throughs under that paragraph 7. Some other ordinances in other cities, I mean, it seems like common sense, but under regulated land use, special land use, and some other facilities, there's a drive-through, and I don't think that would be appropriate for us.
Get high as you drive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for sharing that with the group here. The other thing I went through, and I think more so for user friendliness, is I noticed, like in the previous edition that we had, the state laws were mentioned, the MMFLA and MMTMA. And I think at one point in the ordinance it would be wise to define what those actually were, just as a point of reference in the definition section. Because I think for me it was difficult because I had to go hunt it down. But for an ordinance officer, if he had one document he could go to rather than have to go online and check out what it is, or go for the Michigan Code of Regulations and Laws, I think that'd be helpful, particularly from an ordinance management standpoint. And then on page 3, the definitions were approved, but I thought it would be wise to expand and add in a brief bullet point of a definition there that took into account the MMFLA and the MRTMA laws of the state. And that would be more of a user-friendly type thing. I don't have many more items. And again, when we get into section 11.4 on page 4, one of the things we didn't get into because it required a lot of thought is the number of city licenses to be provided for growers and processor licenses and secure transporters. And the way I differentiated this, I just threw basically a possible number on the wall there. And for growers, possibly 5, maybe less. For processors, 5 or more, because they could be processing material that could be sold and generated. Basically, it'd be another industry for the city. And the processors would provide processed product for other cities. So that was one thought there. Secure transporter fell in the same category. Secure transporters would have to be in an I designation because they've got storage, warehousing, trucks, and so on. But also, maybe include that as like a 5 to 8 quantity. And I was kind of torn between 5 or 8 or maybe less, I don't know. But it's another opportunity for trucking opportunity, business. It could transport product elsewhere beyond the city of Taylor. Safety compliance, I just threw 4 down there because of what safety compliance does. Provisioning center, which is actually a retailer, I was torn between that as to maybe 5 or 8. And again, they'd have to be separate facilities, separate uses, separate licenses as outlined in this ordinance. And, as we discussed once before, separate entrances. And then again, if you're a processor or a grower, there's no retail activity. There's no visitors. The only retail activity would allow walk-ins would be retailers. So the actual processors, the growers, would be basically individuals that work there, the defined individuals that were employed there processing the product. The other things on page 8, I just threw out what I marked down. And other than that, I really didn't have any other comments, but this was quite an improvement over what we had last time. And it was a good starting point from all these other ordinances. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Simeon. Mr. Stewart, do you have any addition?
I have a question, Chair, if I may, through the chair to council. Are there any of the, well, one is we probably cannot control billboards, is that accurate?
Correct.
Are there any, is there an ability for us as a city to monitor? I came out of a restaurant this morning, and when I was finishing my meal, I could smell marijuana.